Hi, and welcome to an interesting hour. We've got an introduction to a resource-based economy. Okay, introducing ourselves, the panel here, four of us today. From left to right, I'll start. My name's Tom Hockney. I'm 19 and I'm in college. I study music technology, and I've been involved in the Venus project for 3 or 4 years now. I'm a point of contact in the UK.
Am I next?
Okay.
I can't tell what's left or right because you're the anyway. Same problem, different Google Hangout. As if this hasn't happened 1 million times before. I'm Sean Hodgins. I've been working with, and volunteering for the Venus Project for nearly 5 years now, and still trying to get some projects done. And we're making some progress on some things, and happy to be here.
My name is Saša Luznar. I'm from Slovenia. I've also been with the project for about the last 3 years. Also a point of contact for Slovenia, and yeah, like Sean said, trying to get some project on the way, and education especially. So.
Great, and I'm Aidan Fry. I'm a point of contact for the Venus Project in the UK, and I've been a supporter for about a year and a half. I'm from Berkshire, and glad to be here.
Okay, so the first thing we've got will be a roughly 9-minute video involving Jacques Fresca, founder of the Venus Project, giving an introduction to a resource-based economy, and we're going to be playing the audio for that because, to be honest, he puts it in as good words as any of us could ever do.
What is a resource-based economy? I'm sure you've all heard about it, but a resource-based economy is entirely different than anything that has ever existed in the past. Most decisions were made by kings, politicians, statesmen, but nothing based upon resources. To better understand the meaning of a resource-based economy, picture an island somewhere in the South Pacific. And you really want to know, how many people can that island support, and to what degree can the extravagance of the island be maintained. First, you have to know how much wood there is, how much water, how much arable land. Once you do a survey of the resources of that island, that can best be the method for determining how many people it will support. If the materials do not exist, you can only design a culture based upon the materials that do exist. You can only grow food based upon the arable land area and the water surrounding the island, the fish, crustaceans, all the other things. And if you have an agronomist on your island, or a series of them, they can advise you as what is best to grow in that tropical region. So you really need technical competence in order to arrive at decisions that make sense. You cannot arrive at decisions that make sense by consensus, by asking people what they want. You have to find out what the island has to offer, and that's what you can determine the future by. All other systems will fail. Politicians have opinions about everything, and information about nothing in particular. Therefore, you understand that the decisions are not made by the majority of people, they're made by the majority of people that have technical competence, that have information in the areas you wish to excel in, and methods of scientific scales of performance. If you have 1 million sincere people that have no technical competence, I can assure you nothing can be accomplished. So you have to ask the questions. Can we build a society of sustainability? If you have no information as to the availability of resources, you cannot undertake such a project. Suppose you have a shortage of resources. That's the function of research labs, to make alternative materials that will substitute for lack of materials. Technicians do not tell you what to do or how to live. They merely carry out the function of designing elevators, transportation units, bridges, housing systems. They do not tell people what to do, what to think, or how to live. That's a mistake that most people make. They think that a resource-based economy has technicians that also tell you what lifestyle to use. No, they don't. The resources determine that. All that the technicians do is build a system that can utilize those resources for the benefit of all the people involved. It has to be global. If it's not global, if you have most of the resources and most of the building equipment and most of the automated machinery and most of the arable land and most of the drinking water, countries that do not have that will attempt to invade your country and take what they need. Every nation wants a piece of the pie. Keep that in mind. So to the degree that you try to live a sustainable life to yourself will not work, because other nations that lack material will invade you. In the rebuilding of cities throughout the world, you have to consider how far those cities are from resources. That means available materials, concrete, steel, reinforcement, etc. If the cities are near that source, then it becomes more efficient to design the cities as systems operations, meaning that the city itself must meet the needs of the people that live there. We announce on television what is available and what is not available at the time, and when it probably will be available. So the public has information of where to go to access whatever it is that they need. So people will have access to more things than they've ever had in a monetary system. More things and more opportunities will be available. All of the cities are designed to utilize a minimum amount of energy for maximum service. In that way, we conserve energy so that we can handle more people. There are people throughout the world that do not have access to high energy systems. We'll be able to provide more for human need if we use efficiency. Naturally, if we fail to do that, you can only take care of a limited amount of people. The resource-based economy has millions of slaves, but they're machines. And machines do repetitive, boring, and dangerous jobs. That's what the machines are for. They're not to put you out of work. If they can turn things out faster than you, we don't need you working. In fact, we don't want you working in an industrial plant. We want you to go back to school and study whatever you're interested in, whatever you think you'd like to study, whatever you feel you'd like to understand better. Unfortunately, money doesn't represent things in existence. If you set a value on every tree, every inch of arable land, all the water, and you printed money proportionate to the resources, so that the money represents resources, then it can have meaning. But today, that is not accomplished. Although they may tell you that demand will really bring about these things. No, demand doesn't bring about the things, available resources do. And if money doesn't represent available resources, it has no basis for social management. When you live in a false society that bases its wealth upon money, then that society itself will collapse eventually, not because I say so, because it's not based on physical reference. In a resource-based economy, where production and automation can turn out more goods and services, there's no need to use money anymore. If you really wish to put an end to war, poverty, hunger, territorial disputes, you must utilize all the world's resources as a common heritage of all the world's people. Anything less than that will remain with the same problems that you've had continuously for centuries. Now you have to consider what I'm saying. The reason nations invade other nations is because of scarcity. When few nations control most of the Earth's resources, you've got to have territorial disputes. No matter how many treaties you sign or laws you make, if you don't declare all the Earth's resources as the common heritage of all the world's people and bring all the separate nations together in one unified system, there is no solution other than that. And this is why we recommend a resource-based economy.
Okay, that should be solid. So, I mean, I can't immediately think of anything to add to that video. I mean, it's pretty good introduction. I could probably talk if discussion were initiated, but I wouldn't know where to start.
Well, what I'm considering is who's the audience right now, and can you re-describe them? I think they were.
Okay.
Where'd my paper go? Oh, I wrote it on. Go ahead.
I'll just get the Facebook page as well of the actual radio show.
So they might be, generally anti-government, anti-capitalist, anarchist type of mentality, and they're in that phase. I call it a stepping stone or a phase. I think there's further to go actually than just being angry at a system, and that's what we're trying to do is take the next step and not just be angry and frustrated with the system, but figure out how to fix it or how to outgrow it or how to evolve past it. So if I'm accurate on that, then I can progress.
Yeah, that's roughly right. Okay.
And then also want to address this idea of being scared of technology. So the first topic I guess we could talk about, and that might get us started, and that is on addressing the crowds or the groups of people that are generally just anti what they're not happy with. And I think we are all in a sense that way. But I think that as far as the Venus Project goes, as far as the Venus Project Global Volunteers, we're attempting to be not anti things. We don't want to be against this or say no to this or prevent this or stop this. What we want to do is try to change our language first by designing and creating a real alternative to the current system, and then allowing people to make the choice to use that alternative rather than fighting against the current system, because for many reasons, probably the most important one is that we have no chance to defeat them anyways. There is, defeating them with signs out in the streets, defeating them with whatever people will talk about, revolution and guns and these types of things. I think that those things are such small chance to be able to accomplish compared to offering a viable alternative for everybody, not just a specific group of people. I think that's a more realistic, more capable, and more generally peaceful way to go about things.
Definitely, and especially in relation to some things that have been going on in the world lately, namely Egypt. The whole revolution there, they didn't really have a plan of what happened, to what comes afterwards. So you get all this violence, then you get ousted people, and you end up with a massive divide between supporters and pro and against, without really a plan to how to actually improve everyone's lives, only the lives of your own section of society.
Yeah, that's the general problem of all the revolutions, in the last time, because there is no alternative, or there is no next step up from democracy. It's not there isn't anything out there that is seriously proposed that would be at least towards something like a resource-based economy. So you're bound to have the same problems again. So you have a revolution, something happens, people get changed in power or whatever you want to call it, and then it might be better for a year or two or not, and then it just goes back to the same way it was before.
I often think of the word revolution in a different light as to how I used to, in that it's like a revolving door. Things get turned around and it changes a bit, but in terms of like literal progress, you're not really moving anywhere.
It's obviously it's a group of frustrated people and especially when protesting and then violence occurs, that means that there are they have no alternatives in their mind. That's their last resort. Usually, violence itself is a last resort of a person who feels like they have no alternatives or no other paths to take. And one of the things we're here to do is provide a possible alternative. We're not here to say this is what you should do, but this is a very strong recommendation. And a person can never make the choice of something like a resource-based economy or a moneyless society or whatever future type of world society we have. They can never even choose it unless it's been they've been exposed to it. So it's either media, TV, by movies, by a person talking to them. You cannot make a decision on something of which you've never been exposed to. So the first step of what we're trying to do is at least expose people to these alternatives, because as, for example, the Egyptian revolution, the Egyptian spring and everything, they removed the power apparently, and then they replaced it with what they felt was an alternative power, but it was so similar. And those were the two options in their head. They had the dichotomy of two. There wasn't a third option, a fourth option, a fifth option for them to make. And so what we can do is at least give them a third option to hopefully in the future give people the opportunity to make that choice. And then you want to talk about freedom. A person who only has one choice, violence, they're not free. A person who only has two choices, violence or revolution, they're not free. But the more choices a person has, the increase of their freedom that becomes. So if they have 3 options, 4 options, 5 options, that opens the doors towards more freedom. And I think that's what one of the major aspects of a resource-based economy is. We want to be giving people as many choices as possible while sustaining ourselves on Earth. And that will maximize freedom for all humans.
Yeah.
Great. So I think another. Sorry, go on.
No, you go ahead, man.
So another good point I think that was raised in that video was about the efficiency and the idea that some people now believe that we have, and there's certain stats to possibly back this up, that we are overpopulated or the Earth is going to be overpopulated in the future. But this is all based on our current method of resource management, which is the monetary system, which is highly inefficient. And what a resource-based economy does is you create an environment where efficiency is king. And so you get the most amount of energy or use out of any resource that you have for the benefit of all people, not for the profit of a small minority of people.
Like if you think about overpopulation, the term refers to a population's needs not being met. So, I mean, if you have like X amount of resources, then your population exceeds the amount of resources which are needed to provide for those people. So it could be both a problem of literally too many people, too much population, or also on the other end of the scale, a lack of resources and resource management, distribution, etc. So, I mean, to deal with overpopulation, it seems to me that the best way would be increase the latter, the resource production management efficiency.
Yeah, and increased education, of course. I mean, education is the key component in trying to get, population. Well, I don't want to say control, but population control is not needed if all the populace is actually educated, which has been shown even in this system that is chronically bad right now. It's still studies have shown this over and over again. Educated people have less children, and this is something that's not even contested anymore.
There's a really good guy. He does a lot of lectures. His name is Hans Rosling, and he did a TEDx event. And he's done a few of them actually, and he discusses global population concerns and kind of debunks the whole thing. And I would like to say it just plain and simple: overpopulation is a myth. Now, it had good founding and good thoughts maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, and that was people's perception of growth rates or birth rates in other countries. But I'll give you an example. Japan this year, for the first time in history, has less population than it did last year. It actually went down in population. And so we would look into the factors of what contributed to that. Well, there's many contributions to that, but one of them majorly is education, and the other one is standard of living. They're an industrialized island, and they're a great analogy or example of Earth. They are an island in the middle of the ocean, and they have to sustain themselves and sustain their population at a certain level. If they go too high, there won't be enough resources around to sustain each other. We'll expand that to Earth, because Earth is limited resources also. So it is more intelligent, if humans want to survive, to make decisions, smarter decisions based on population growth. And so for the example of Japan, they actually went down this year. If you look at projections, they're looking to project at a maximum ever on Earth of 13 billion people. Instead of this 50 billion, 100 billion people, and then eventually we overrun the world and we're all killing each other and all that stuff. It's a myth, and it's propagated by the fear mongers or the people that make money off making you fearful, and it's incorrect. And as the internet, as cell phones, and as these types of things are occurring, global education, the numbers are going down, and specifically educated and educated women is the #1 factor to controlling population. And it's not us controlling them, it's them controlling themselves and us controlling ourselves. And that's what I theorize what will happen in a resource-based economy, is when everybody has, or in the near future, when everybody has access to all information at all times, and if you and your wife are having to make a decision on having a baby or not, and you know that the world's becoming a little bit more higher population than you think, you might make the decision to not have the baby. So in that sense, you are controlling the global population. The global population is not controlling you. That's the difference. So when everybody has access to a certain thing, and as we make those decisions on our own, we will control ourselves. And I'm sure many of our people and many of the people even listening are in a sense controlling their own population by making the decisions to not have children. And some of them are not having children because I don't want my children to be raised in this shitty world. And I had that mentality for the longest time. And so we do and can control ourselves without the need for external control, and that is through relevant education.
Yep.
So anyway, Hans Rosling, TEDx event, he explains it very well, and that we might peak out at around 13 billion, and even at the tops. And even on top of that, if we efficiently distribute and use technology correctly, we could sustain hundreds of billions, if not much more, humans on Earth. Be it on land masses, be it on the oceans, the seas. 76% of Earth is covered in sea. And so how much room do we have out there? And then the whole fact that everybody on Earth could fit in an area of Texas, a small area of Texas. So there's plenty of room. We're just not efficiently utilizing it. So we could have theoretically hundreds of billions of people instead of only the 7 billion we have now, and it's likely we won't ever exceed 13 billion. So that's why I go into the whole thing of overpopulation is a myth, and educate yourself on it by watching these types of lectures and counter lectures, whatever you want to watch, and at least then formulate an opinion before you just take on the overall mentality of overpopulation problems. It's just is not true.
Yep.
Great. So another good point from that video was about machine automation and how that could be used to then create this efficiency and create this abundancy to provide for upwards of our population up to much higher numbers, theoretically. And also the way that automation would be used and to create technical unemployment. But within a resource-based economy, that is a positive thing. That sends people back to school, gets them educated, more interested, and more free. Whereas where we are now, people become unemployed and become poor and so on. So that's a good, I think, a good use of, a good example of using machines and automation and science for the concern of humanity rather than for the concern of profit, which is what a resource-based economy is about.
I think a very good example of that is already happening right now if you really look at it from a right perspective. Because if you look at developed countries such as, you know, England, USA, and whatnot, these are the percentages of people that are employed by or in, you know, all these fields that are necessary, you know, absolutely necessary for sustaining human life, such as energy, you know, agriculture, and production, is, you know, 20% maybe. You know, just the agriculture itself, less than 1% or less than 2%. So this is extreme production, you know, where you have, you know, 1,000 people providing for 1,000,000, and this is shown, you know, all over the world. And if you look at it that way, you know, then there's 80% of you know, employment out there that is not basic human needs. So there is, you know, so much stuff that can be automated. You know, whereas right now the rest of 80% of the world is just selling, you know, basically their time to one another. That's what's happening.
It's.
I think.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
I was going to say, I think this discussion would lead quite nicely to the question and answer, FAQ question about incentive.
Sure, so we'll go into that. So on the Venus Project's website, thevenusproject.com, there is a whole load of frequently asked questions from over 25 years. We've kind of picked out a few, and the one that Tom's mentioning right now is, say, number 4, Tom.
71 is incentive. Number 4 is with regards to decent people in government.
Sorry, which one would you like to go into right now?
Number 71, regarding incentive, because a lot of one of the most frequent questions I kind of get whilst talking about machines taking kind of the jobs and doing them much more efficiently than people, manual labor jobs, is more often than not, is would people not lose their incentive? So incentive for, I mean, there would still be need for human activity in society. I mean, not nearly on the same scale as what we have now, and not even necessarily need, like, I mean, in departments of culture, so art and any form of art. Obviously, people. The question that I ask myself is: do people follow these professions for monetary profit, or for, you know, another type of incentive that could be achieved in a resource-based economy? So we could read just as a side note now, we could read directly from the website.
Sure.
So it's quite a long one, so maybe we'll do a paragraph at a time and then talk about it.
Yeah. Okay, so you have been brought up. You may have been brought up to believe that people are inspired by rewards or money. The free enterprise system does not create incentive to achieve. However, it also breeds the incentive for corruption, theft, and greed. Our aim is to encourage a new incentive system, one no longer directed towards the shallow or self-centered goals of wealth, profit, property, and power. Today, financial barriers place enormous limitations on innovation, individual creativity, and personal incentive. In the Venus Project, a resource-based economy, money would not be required to help one achieve or create, as facilities would be made available to serve everyone's needs. Okay.
Yeah, well, this is a very common question, you know, about would people lose incentive, and it's it's like as I think people should be asking themselves, what is their incentive to spend their free time the way they're spending it. What is their incentive to have a hobby that they profit nothing from monetarily, like playing the guitar although you're not a musician, or going out running although you're not going to be running marathons for money, or whatever you're doing, climbing, be it what is their incentive to do that. If they're not paid for it, very often you have to pay yourself out of your pocket to do those activities, and yet you still do them. So what is the incentive there? I think that's what people are not really asking themselves.
We built a specific website to kind of take the FAQ to version 2.0 and 3.0, and that's here on askjacquefresco.com. Go to it. Can you guys see that? Okay. AskJacquefresco.com. This is built by Jeff in Turkey. Did a really good job on it, and still a work in progress. But we did the TVP FAQ is 1.0, I would call it. The Q&A with audio support would be 2.0, and the Q&A with audio and video, I would say, is 3.0. So this one, go under specific Q&A, and then incentive. It has a nice little write-up, but it also has a couple RSA animates that cover incentive, and I'm sure everybody here has seen these already, but I would strongly recommend RSA Animate. It's called Drive, D-R-I-V-E, The Surprising Truth About Motivation. Fantastic. It gives you a really good insight into that. And then the RSA Animate on the empathetic civilization. It also talks about incentive. So very good stuff there, and there's plenty of stuff already available to answer this question. But in the sense, like, just give some perspective to it. In America, in the most capitalistic society on earth, in the most selfish society on earth, 6% of us still spend hours and hours each week. There's millions of hours spent in America every week on volunteerism. In fact, what we're doing here right now, we're volunteering. We're doing this stuff for free. Creating videos, we're creating audio, we're creating graphics, all for free. So, and in a country that is the most anti, giving up your time for free, 26% of us still find time to do that, and that's in a culture that doesn't teach to do that. And imagine a world or a culture that is teaching people to do things, in that sense, to be giving to others, because by giving to others, you're actually giving back to yourself, because you will have an effect on the entire globe and how things are working out. So it is a selfish endeavor, actually, to be helping each other out. In a resource-based economy, to be improving society is to be improving your standard of living. So that will be the incentive then. And then there's tricks. There are tricks where you can. Jack has talked about what about that person who's just going to sit around and play video games all day, and that would be a transitional more type of thing. I doubt it would happen in an actual fully realized resource-based economy. But even so, if somebody were to be sitting home playing video games all day, there would be incentives. For this person to eat, he might have to go and walk up the stairs. For him to play the next video game, he might have to program it a little bit. He might have to assemble the actual controller. These types of things where you're kind of creating the environment where the person is essentially forced to do something, and then they might get the reward out of that, which might incentivize them to work more to get the reward out of that, to work more to get not the reward necessarily, but the result out of it, and then fold that back into society where what they are doing is benefiting society also. And Jack also talked about children. How do you get them to exercise? You put the playground on top of a hill across a river, so they have to go across and row a boat, just to get to where they're going, or it might be a classroom that they're really excited to go to. So you build these things into the environment, and people will do them. I don't see people out there protesting a hill or a mountain, to get to where they need to go. They're not going, I'm not going up that mountain, or they're not holding up signs saying, take down this mountain, I'm tired of walking over it. No, it's a normal thing in the environment, and they use it. They have to. There's no choice about it. So we can use some of those tricks to ensure that humans are not sitting around lazy all the time, I suppose. But without a means of controlling them, you know, we don't want to go into that aspect.
And some of these things are already happening even in the capitalist system. And some of the links that Sean referred to, you know, you can take a look at them. What you know, Google is doing, Skype, you know, Linux, and there's a lot of companies out there that have, you know, these week, you know, a day of the week where they have, you know, absolutely relinquished control of what the workers are doing, you know, kind of just saying, you know what, you guys are doing a great job, you know, you have some ideas for new project, you know, just go and collaborate and do them. You know, and there's some really, really cool stuff that come out of that, come out of those days, you know, where people just collaborate and do things that they, you know, had ideas for doing. You know, so this is something that's already been exhibited, even in the system that we have right now.
And most of the technical developments that have actually physically improved a lot of people's lives over the last, say, 200 years have been made by scientists and by inventors who weren't, at the time, motivated by profits. They were normally shunned by their peers at the period of time. They normally died impoverished.
And limited. They were limited by profits also.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think it's important to note as well that if someone did want to sit around and explore video games or something like that, which, I don't know, other people may consider not beneficial to society at all, that's not really a problem in a resource-based economy for them or society, because society is running quite well. The fundamental needs of the people have been met through automated machines, and you know, if I want to spend my life doing something like that, I both have my needs met and society's doing fine at as well. So it's not essential.
I just got an idea. I think that it's been touched on, but I don't know if it's been explained like this. And is that inside the video games or some similar situation, we would build in a problem of society. So say we're having a problem figuring out how to deal with the span of this, you know, this cut in the ground, this crevice, this canyon or whatever, and we have to build a bridge across it. Inside the video game this person is playing is this problem and the tools that we have available to fix it, and they're seeing it as a puzzle. But you know how in video games there's puzzles, and we could utilize the brain power of somebody who is just sitting around playing video games, and we could measure the results and how they build that bridge and say, is this a correct way to do it? And that could be something added to the technical team that is also working on this problem. So, I mean, you can fold in that sense, you can fold in those supposed lazy people that everybody is thinking about, you know, and fold it back into society and being useful. And there's probably hundreds of examples of being able to do that. I'm just randomly thinking of one.
Mm-hmm. And also maybe one other thing, you know, laziness is something that is contrary to what people think. It's not in our nature to just be lazy. It's not like we're, you know, we have that drive to just lay around in the couch all the time. You know, this is something we're, you know, if you look at kids, they're running around all the time. They're touching stuff. You know, they're scientists. They're explorers. You know, they're not just laying there on the couch going, you know, I don't want to do shit. But, you know, so this is something that is also kind of perpetuated in the society that we have, because once you're exposed to 8 or 10 hours of work on something that you really either don't like, or it's pointless, you know, or it's not learning, you know, anything new, repetitive, you know, when you come home, you're just tired of everything. You just want to lay down and just, you know, forget about doing anything. So this is something that is also a consequence of the system, and not really vice versa.
And what you'll see with these RSA animates, you can find them on YouTube easily, and in the link below the video, is that the incentive is, after a person's needs are met, you know, that they're sheltered, food, housed, and educated, and they have clean air, clean water. After those needs are met, monetary or item, you know, acquisition as an incentive falls off immensely. And what the incentive comes after that is mastery. And that means that we are, as humans, incentivized already for exploration and mastery of whatever it is we're endeavoring into. And there's been studies done in, what is it, the 5,000 hour rule. 5,000 hours is actually a lot. But in the resource-based economy, for us today, it's a lot because we're working, we're raising kids, we're trying to survive. In the future, we will have multitudes of masteries because we'll have the opportunity and the time to get that 5,000 or 10,000 hours in each area. And in fact, our education techniques might make it not necessarily need 5,000 hours. You might need only a few hundred hours in an area to become the equivalent of a mastery in that specific area as today. So what I'm getting to is humans could be theoretical masters in so many areas in the future because they will simply have the time to do so. And in today's world, we're all stuck below that threshold because we're all in survival mode. And while we're stuck in survival mode, yeah, sure, incentive is based on trying to survive, and that's linked to acquiring money today, so we can acquire the needs of ourselves and our families. So what we're trying to do is surpass that and get humans to a place where they can actually begin to live, and then we can begin to have an actual civilization.
Yeah, and bearing in mind this applies to everyone anywhere on the globe right now. So like the standards and living conditions of people will be equal. Like just because you live in Africa, or what would be considered a third world country now, well, those places would be innovated, and until the standards and conditions there would be equal to England or America. So I mean, the standard of education, the standard of motivation, this standard of like expertise would be a global thing. So not only is it a high standard of education, but also a high reach of education comparative to today.
Yeah, every brain on Earth has the capability to reach the level of somebody like Da Vinci or Einstein. Nearly every brain. There are some cases where they are limited by physiological traits, but that means if you agree with that, or if you understand even that to a small percentage, I try to understand it as a high percentage, but if you understand that even to a small degree, that means we are wasting immeasurable amounts of human potential and immeasurable amounts of capabilities and innovation and just brain power every single day, because humans are dying in this way or that, or they are suffering in this way or that, or they are a slave to the world or a corporation or a government or a business or a theology, a dogmatic theology or something. They're a slave to something where we're not utilizing that brain power. And so that's it's a tragic waste of possibility throughout the world.
And even the people who are educated by our current standards to a fairly high degree tend to be specialists. You tend to have such a narrow focus of what an area that you're knowledgeable about. Everything else is just a blurry mist, and you're then blinded to the greater implications that face us all. Is becoming a generalist. If you had a general grounding in all the different areas that affect human behavior and the welfare of humans, then we could all make decisions based on a more grounded, general basis.
Mm.
Yeah, because specialists, just to touch on that, specialists pigeonhole an individual human into an area where they can have literal blinders on about that subject area. And yes, they will become experts and mastery in that area, but the world as a whole is a system, and they're integrated systems, and integrated systems do not have a blind mindset towards one direction. And that's what can happen to a lot of scientists today and a lot of professors today and a lot of high-level anything today, is that they get pigeonholed into a focus area. They become very good at it, and then they become reinforced by the local environment about it. Whether they're out there on talk shows or writing books on this specific area, that's reinforcing their pigeonholing or their focus or their blindness to other things, and they'll continue to do it. And then when they're supported by monetary system, which is them becoming, financially secure or even rich off of this idea, they will continue to do it. Why would somebody step out of their comfort zone if their comfort zone is being reinforced? So this is where, of course, there are scientists and there are people who do go outside of those realms and they don't stay this blinder on. But to take opinions from somebody who is just an absolute expert in one area is not relevant to the world as a whole. And so we have to take into consideration those things. A person who has a specific expertise in one area cannot address all issues on Earth. It needs things that are called generalists. And that's one of the things we tend to see Jacques as, is a generalist, because he's touched on so many different areas that his ideas and inventions and his plans in certain areas are more relevant than a person who is pigeonholed into one area. And so I'm sure it's not that hard of a concept to understand. Being knowledgeable in many areas is better than being knowledgeable in one area.
Great. So I think this would probably be a good point to go on to the next frequently asked question that we have set up. So the next one is, isn't it just decent people that we need in government?
Yeah, we touched up on this one actually before. Talking about revolutions and whatnot. I think it's very applicable here. And maybe to rather than go into that, just give an example of, if you have, let's say that you have a very old car, and then you have brakes don't work, it's breaking down all the time, you have one tire is flat and whatnot, and then what you do to solve the problem is you change the driver, So if you do that, it doesn't really solve your problem. I mean, the driver can be, better, obviously, and he can drive the car better, but if the car itself is in a very bad shape, then it's still going to be dangerous, if the brakes are not working and everything else. So just changing the car's driver is not going to solve your problem. There's greater challenge, not just changing a government, not just changing someone that is in power, or whatever you want to call it. This is not long-term solution to the problem, and we've seen it in all these revolutions and whatnot. You have a dictator that is being removed from power, and then you get a politician or a party or whatever that comes to the government and is in power, and nothing changes. And we've seen that everywhere, and it's been like that in Slovenia as well. Changing a prime minister doesn't do anything, basically.
It's like, that's a good analogy. I like that. And it's like we don't want people making decisions, people in power making decisions. We want decisions regarding society to be arrived at through the best methods of data production, interpretation, analysis, whatever that may be. So to think that having humans elected into power, humans with their agendas and their values, being the best form of making those decisions, it seems to me that would be incredibly inefficient, and that a better solution would be automation, as we discussed earlier.
Yeah, and another point, that we often try to present is that, no one person, what you're doing when you're voting for someone or when you're changing the government, from one side to the other, or one person to another, it's just there is no one person that can make the adequate changes, because if you ask them, how are you gonna improve the social status, how are you gonna increase the agricultural yield, how are you gonna solve these problems, there is no systemic answers to that. There's just a lot of talk about what we're going to try to do, but there is no physical reference to what can actually be done. That's something that you don't hear. And in addition to that, you only vote for that one person once every 4 years, and after this person or party is elected to power, or whatever you want to call it, you have zero say in what they're going to do. They can go back on every word that they gave. They can go and change whatever laws or constitutions or whatnot, and you are powerless to prevent anything.
And bear in mind, this question is also with regard to having competent and, can't remember how it was worded, competent and decent people in government. I mean, if we wanted to, we could go into detail about how the current democracy system works in, I suppose, UK, America, and globally, and we could talk about that for a long time, about how that's intrinsically doesn't serve the needs of the people and is corrupt.
Well, that's sorry, go on. There you go.
Me? All right, fine. Well, this thing gets brought up a lot. In fact, there's actually somebody, I believe, running for Senate, right? Likely a low chance of winning, but the idea is let's go ahead and play this game, because these answers that or these questions we get are usually from people who spent maybe 1 minute of thinking about this. And if you go through the content, if you go through the website, if you research some things on yourself, you will arrive at the answer anyways. And the answer to this one for me, and hopefully this one will work for you guys also, is let's just go ahead and get a person elected. Let's figure out how to do that. One person. Let's just deal with this math, because the math on more is going to be harder. How do you get somebody elected? How do you run their campaign? How much money is involved? And basically you have to almost meet the money that the other candidates are putting in. So at this point, whether it be a mayor, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars. If you're a state governor, you're probably running campaigns in the multiple millions, 10s, 20s, 50, 100 million. If you're trying to become a senator, your campaign is hundreds of millions of dollars in commercials, in funding, in leaflets, and people walking. You pay people to walk around town and campaign. This is just to get one person elected, okay? So you tell me how we're going to raise hundreds of millions of dollars to get one person elected. Now this is in America. Maybe it's different in your area. And then you say, okay, well, listen, we got to start somewhere, so let's be a mayor of a town. Well, also good luck with that, because that's a 7-year, 10-year, 15, 20-year plan that you're working out right now. That might work. So anyway, that's just for one candidate. So we got one person elected because we magically pulled $100 million out of our ass, and we ran the campaign on reality, and people liked that campaign. Most people, so the guy got elected, and now he's in office. Well, guess what? Now he's one person who has one vote against 100 or 300 other votes. So we now have 1%. After we did this amazing accomplishment, we have 1% chance that there might be some influence in government. And so for me, and that's 20 years from now when we finally made that happen, is that a viable plan? I think it is not. And I think that it's just not a possible plan, and the same thing with the Venus Project. They don't see that as a viable plan at all. Now, is that to say, no, don't ever even think of this and don't do it? No, it's not to say that. But it's just to say that it's not the most, my recommendation, and as far as I see from the Venus Project, the recommendation is that it's not the most efficient use of our current resources, so let's try other ways to go about it.